All right, welcome back to From Vision to Victory podcast with my special guest, Vincent Alverez, all the way in from Utah. How's it going, Vincent?
I'm doing well, doing well.
Man, I'm excited about this. This is the first trainer that I've had on my podcast. Usually I do some entrepreneurs and certainly some big time soccer players, but no one that's ever really worked full time with athletes. So I don't know about you, but I'm pumped up about this episode. Before we get into this episode, though, this show is sponsored by Say Less Meal Prep, which is run by Shelby Salvation. She's a former Division I athlete, soccer player at Sac State. And her mindset was to help people fuel their body, whether it's for their 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or for elite athletes that don't have time to really prepare food before their big events. The second sponsor of the show is Paleta Planeta, which is the owner of a shop in Eastside San Jose, which makes Mexican ice cream that are little treats. And one thing about these treats, though, man, they are super addicting. So make sure you have plenty of storage in your refrigerator. And the nice thing about both of them is that you can DoorDash or go into their shops and pick it up. All right, so back to our special guest today, Vincent Alverez, who owns what would you call it, the facility that you own in Utah?
I'd consider it a specialized training business.
Specialized,
yeah.
right.
It's tailored towards soccer players, obviously, but I am in the market for additional athletes. I got a couple softball players that are in my gym.
Nice.
A couple dual athletes as well. So
Nice.
some soccer players that also play basketball and all down the line there.
Let's dive into your background a little bit, because I'm sure that people that are like in the Bay Area that haven't really heard of you yet, just to kind of go into your childhood. So where did you grow up?
So I was actually born and raised in Santa Barbara, California. So I was born there in 1990.
Nice.
So quite a while ago, I guess you can say. But that's where I grew up. And then I actually made my way up towards Lompoc area.
Nice.
So I don't normally address that too much just because I feel like Santa Barbara is the nearest city that's probably more popular to most people. But I feel like Lompoc is a city that kind of has a connection with me and
Nice.
another couple of athletes that have come out of there as well. Julian Araujo. I know one of the young ladies, Kiki from Stanford as well is from there. So I don't mind mentioning it now here and there.
Kiki was a baller.
Yeah.
She was a baller. What was home life for? Were you an only child or siblings?
So I got one older brother.
Okay.
He is about 3.5 years older than me.
All right.
He still resides there in Santa Barbara County, so he's over in Santa Maria.
Okay.
He did play soccer as well.
Cool.
So I think that was something that I always kind of pay tribute to, watching my older brother play ball and then kind of tapping into that as a youngster, going to all his practices and all that stuff. So yeah, he's a big part of my upbringing for sure.
What sports did you play growing up?
I actually played everything. So I think from the age of probably around 3 is when I started the AYSO situation.
Oh, yeah.
And then I tapped into YFL football, baseball, so Little League, and then basketball as well. So I played those 4 mainly, not too many others competitively.
Did you think all those sports played into you becoming an elite athlete? And we'll surely touch on, you actually playing at Santa Barbara. But do you think that was the foundation of you being an athlete and being successful is playing multiple sports?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I have a different opinion on it now, but I think that it definitely, I was actually just thinking about that the other day. Like, I think all of the movement and skills that you learn throughout those other sports definitely contribute to your athleticism.
Right.
But as far as specializing in one, I think that's a decision that's made at a certain point in your youth development for sure.
If you had to build the perfect soccer player, are there any particular sports that you would say, hey, look, you should do this, that'll help long term?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think the soccer foundation is a little bit in some other field sports, but as far as soccer itself, I really don't think so. I think it just kind of sits on its own, and either you have it or you don't, and that's just my honest opinion about it.
Nice. So, what age did you go like, man, all these other sports are nice, but I love soccer?
Um, I think that happened around 10 years old.
Okay.
I would say 10 years old was a conversation that I actually had with my parents. So I think, and hopefully we can touch on that a little bit later, but I know that decision needs to be made at some point
Oh yeah.
in youth development, just because if you're not focused on one, your brain will be scattered, your body will be scattered. And so, like I said, for myself, I think it was around 10 years old. My father had that conversation with me and just said, "Hey, if I'm going to be paying for competitive sport or a club, commitment,
Right.
these you can either play all the sports year round, or and I'll pay whatever fees there is for AYSO and whatnot, but majority of those aren't as committed as a youth soccer club. The type of fees that these clubs are charging, it definitely is a commitment.
And at 10 years old, were you playing like competitive, or were you still kind of?
I was still playing. Some people may laugh, but yeah, I was still playing AYSO
Oh
probably
wow.
until about fifth grade.
Wow.
So yeah, that was about sixth grade that I was entering into that full commitment, I'd say, of club soccer.
Pe-
So
People nowadays would say that's a late bloomer.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's kind of I have my own criticisms on that for sure. Especially since being in Utah, there's a handful of athletes that I think are not necessarily starting too early,
Right.
but there's this like commitment that's automatically put on this child at 7, and even before. I think some of these academies start even at 5 years old now, and some of these kids are burned out by 10 years old.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot for them.
Man, we'll certainly dive into that a little bit deeper because, and that's one of the reasons why I have you on the show because so far a lot of the guests have been, talking to guests or talking to people through the player's eyes. And now I think it's important for people to get the other view looking at soccer or any sport or basketball, football through a trainer's eyes and things like that. Because for every person that we have on here that's super successful, there's people that have taken the same route that weren't as successful or maybe burnt out. So I think, the Williams sisters in tennis and Tiger Woods, like their parents have kind of changed the landscape of how things are done now. And you see kids specialize at like 5 years old. Even the club that I work for, we have kids that are 4 and 5 that are starting and almost looking for, the parents are looking for a year-round commitment and stuff like that. So we'll certainly dive into that. For soccer, what was it that you enjoyed so much?
Um, I think the culture.
Okay.
The culture was big for me. I loved the bright green field. I loved watching the game.
Oh yeah.
There was some big name players, and then obviously my father had a huge influence on me. He played, not at a high level, but he played recreationally, a little bit of competitive as well. But it was very big in my household.
Oh, nice.
It was the popular sport for sure. I was diving into those other sports, but I don't think anyone. And also with my brother playing, like I
Right.
said, I think when you have an older sibling that you're kind of looking up to, and at that point he was playing competitively.
Okay.
So when I was still an AYSO player, he was playing club, and I was like, well, that's where I want to get to. And so that was a big influence on me. My dad pushed it on me. I would practice with my team, and then I would go out and practice with my brother's team.
Oh, jeez.
I was doing technical work with my dad. He also coached me, so I'm sure that's obviously a contributing factor for
Oh, yeah.
me. But I'd say for the most part, it's the culture. I think it was some of those other sports just weren't for me. Like football definitely wasn't for me. All the barking and yelling and smashing face masks and all that kind of stuff wasn't for me. Baseball was a little too slow. So I wasn't. I did enjoy baseball, but I think just the overall aspect of it just didn't click for me.
Right.
And then basketball, I could not shoot the ball. So I think dribbling around people and then finally getting to the basket or getting an open shot, I just couldn't put it in the hole. So soccer was probably the most successful one, I'd say, for myself, and I was just around it so much with the influence of Santa Barbara. So many players playing over there. So that was a big one for me.
Did your brother kind of lay the foundation for you to be successful? It sounds like your dad was in the background too as a coach, but were you able to look up to your brother and just be like, all right, I see him doing it. I kind of want that same success?
I'd say probably opposite, to be honest. I'd say he was a different player, a different type of player, very, very aggressive defensive player, whereas myself, I was more on the offensive side. I wanted to do the flicks, the tricks, the goal celebrations and stuff like that. So, but I would say for him to kind of lay that foundation from the steps that it takes to get there, right? So in the time that he was being recruited for soccer or for colleges, I was tapping into that like U13, U14 aspect where I still had a couple of years to figure that out, right? So making moves to bigger clubs,
Right.
so not just staying in Santa Barbara. And I think the biggest letdown for my brother was that he just moved so late to that LA club, right? So we played in Santa Barbara for Football Club Santa Barbara at the time.
Okay.
It's SBSC now, but at that time he had no idea. My dad had no idea which direction to go for recruitment, right? So come U17, U18, he says, hey, let's get you on Eagles.
Right.
And to me, by then it's too late.
Oh, yeah.
16, 17, you're looking at maybe 2 years at JUCO, and then you're moving on from there. But my dad then took that different approach.
Right.
So I would say my brother was kind of the guinea pig.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of the case for a lot of parents nowadays. If you have that older sibling, and it's nothing to knock the older sibling, but usually the younger athlete is the one that comes out on top.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know all the steps that it takes to get there, and what not to do, either what to do or what not to do. And I think in my case, it was what not to do.
It's funny that you say that because I have 2 kids, and my son was the guinea pig, right? Like, so like, when he was first born, we like foolproofed the whole house, and every little corner had padding on it, and and after he was born, and I made tons of mistakes because you're parenting on the fly. The second child was easier. Like I just knew what I was doing, and if I had a third one, it'd be even easier, right? And so it's like, you're right. The oldest kid usually is the guinea pig. Sometimes the parents go, okay, now I know not what to do and things like that.
Absolutely.
And you see it in a lot of families where, if it's a family of 3, the middle child is much better than the oldest, and then the youngest is much better than the 2 older ones, just because the parents have had a chance to kind of sit back and see how to navigate sports like that.
Absolutely. And I think the youngest also gets to see the most.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So they have to go to older siblings' game, go to the middle. So they're seeing 10 times more soccer, right? Or double the soccer, triple the soccer. If they're a soccer player, if they're, whatever sport it is, they're definitely getting to see all of those steps be taken, and then they want to duplicate them.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that's a big influence on a lot of kids.
Any great memories of club soccer? I imagine you guys went to like surf, maybe a Dallas Cup.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think to tap into that, I mean, I didn't stay at Santa Barbara Soccer Club, so I think going off of what my brother's story was, going into my U13 year was when my dad had, I remember vividly going to, I think it was like Pismo Beach tournament or something local, right? Because Santa Barbara Soccer Club, we just didn't get out much at the time. We were just playing locally, and then occasionally would go to like a decent tournament, but I don't even think we got bids into some of those yet.
Wow.
So what happened was we actually got our butts kicked up in San Luis Obispo, and it was against SoCal United at the time, who is, I don't even know what they are now. I would imagine LAFC, I believe, but it was Real SoCal. And so, yeah, we got our butts kicked, and my dad actually loved the coach, loved the operation of the team. And so we reached out to that team at the time.
Okay.
And that was my youth coach, Dan Metcalf, who was a big influence on me growing up. And so we reached out to him. We sent an email down and just asked to come out to practice, just to find out. He was like, yeah, come on down. Let's check you out. He had some kind of insight on me, so to speak, but nothing major. And then so he returned our email, said, hey, come on out to train. And then I was invited at the end of the 2 weeks of training to head down to a tournament in Arizona.
Oh, nice.
And he was like, I'll kind of be like the final step. And I guess I impressed him, and he offered me an opportunity on the team. So after that week, I remember coming back to my Santa Barbara team and told the coach I'd be leaving. And so that was a big move for me. So that was out of, Westlake, Calabasas area. So I was commuting from Lompoc all the way down to Calabasas.
How long was that drive?
It's about, at the time, so like I said, we were already commuting to Santa Barbara for school.
Right.
So I was waking up around 6:45 in the morning, get down to school, and my parents would have to be at work by 8ish, so they would drop me an hour early, and then we would hop in the car after school. My dad would pick me up twice a week minimum,
Right.
and we'd head to Westlake around, beat the traffic. So he'd pick me up at 3:30, and then we'd head down, get there at 5, practice didn't start till 7.
Jeez.
So you're doing homework, you're sleeping, you're eating, whatever it is, and then practice was from 7 to 9, and then we'd hop back in the car at 9 and get back home around midnight. So it was about a 3-hour drive.
Would both your parents do the driving too, or is
Mainly my dad. Yeah.
So
mainly my
growing up and seeing your dad's work ethic and work rate, and this isn't even his dream. This is your dream, right? Like he's.
It might have been split.
It might have been split,
might have
a
been
little
split.
50-50 or
Yeah.
60-40?
My dad did tear his ACL playing soccer, so I think somewhat vicariously living through me, so
Okay.
to speak, but I absorbed every second of it. So I was like, we were the best of friends in the car for the most part. I mean, he was super hard on me, and I don't think I would have came out this way regardless, but that was part of that discipline factor, right? So he would ask me though, right? So he came to me and said, hey, do you want me to email this coach? Do you want me to talk to this trainer? Do you want to go train here? Because if not, because he's like, if I'm not gonna, if you don't want to, I'm not gonna pay for it.
Right.
But I will do what I have to get you to that level.
Love
so
it.
that was kind of that sacrifice. But yeah, I think it paved a huge road for me because he was able to lay those guidelines out for me. So
He was laying that foundation.
exactly.
Nice. At what age did you start recognizing, look, I can play at this level, and you're starting to think about the next level, which would be college?
Well, I think the first step was that move, right? So you have to move to that top team.
Right.
You gotta find out, can I play at that level,
Yes,
at the youth
yes,
level, right?
yes.
Because if you can't play at that level at 12, 13,
Right.
with that speed of play, whatever that may be, at the time it was, let's just say, was it UISA nationals or regionals, and that was that setup, right? Well, going back to my transfer from teams, immediately I was then put into the regional pool or the state pool
For ODP,
when
yeah.
ODP was actually a little more popular.
Oh yeah.
So that was a huge switch for me. So I went from being on Santa Barbara Soccer Club, losing quite a bit, and great development though. I mean, for the most part, the foundation was great. Just I think the seriousness of the players didn't quite get there. So then I go to a team full of studs, and I was recognized immediately. So now I'm in ODP. From ODP tryouts and all of that, now you're at the regional level. The regional level is technically college coaches, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Eric Yamamoto is one of my first coaches for a regional team.
Oh,
so
yeah.
now you're being you're in the system now.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So now from there, you're getting picked from there, regional camp to national pool.
Right.
So now you're doing tours, you're going overseas and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I think that turnover comes, right? So you can play, if you can play ball, you'll be seen, right? But you have to be in the right positions. And I think even going back to your original question, which was, what are some memories that I have? Those are the memories, right? Like getting selected ODP, getting selected regionals, getting selected to national pool, getting the opportunity to go to Argentina. I think I did a tour in Argentina 2014, or 2004, and then Italy in 2007 with Mario Sanchez, who's now the director over at Louisville.
Oh, yeah.
Racing Louisville.
Mario used to be where at UNLV.
He was
I
at
think.
UNLV at the time, yeah. So he was trying to recruit us there, and then, but yeah, I mean, big memory was in Dallas Cup. I won Dallas Cup in, what was that, 06, I think? So that was a big one. We beat FC Groningen in the final.
What?
So yeah, so we were studs. So that team,
Look at you being humble though. Come on, man. Like that. Like for people that don't know, like you go to Dallas Cup now, it's a good level.
Yeah.
Dallas Cup back then, you had the international team.
Absolutely.
The U17 national team that was stationed in Bradenton would play. So I mean, to be in Dallas Cup was the best of the best in the nation.
I would say in the world, man.
Yeah.
Because you had the super group,
Mm-hmm.
so that was all the Manchester United at the time. The time that we wanted, Manchester United was there.
Yeah. Beckham
But
Beckham played in the
yep,
at Dallas Cup.
yeah, I remember. I think Giuseppe Rossi was there at the time that I was there, so he was in the U19 division super group.
Jeez.
Real Madrid was there, so yeah, it was huge. So yeah, it was a great experience, a great once again that culture,
Right.
right? It's that culture that either it's kind of in your DNA or
Yep.
it's not, and we kind of fed off of that.
Right.
So our team was good. So we definitely had a stint with SoCal United.
Right.
We then broke off to Rampage FC, who I don't even think is alive anymore. And then at Rampage, we turned into DMS 11. And I don't think anyone. I would have. I believe DMS 11 is still around, and that's Dan Metcalf, my old coach's
Yep.
club. He created that. So we were kind of this independent team where we same players, just different names, different jerseys.
I think that club might now be Del Mar.
Maybe
It might be
maybe they
like Del
slide
Mar
down.
Sharks or something like that.
Yeah. So we had some good memories together for sure. Some regional titles, national titles, all the above.
With you working with athletes, there always becomes a time when it's time for that fish to like leave the pond that they're in and go to a bigger one. But you see a lot of players do it and it works out, like it worked out for you, and you see a lot of people do it and they're so ambitious and they do it and they just bomb out, and then the kid quits playing in a couple years. How do you know, like, if you were giving advice to someone that's listening, maybe that's their 8-year-old kid and maybe they're thinking about it's time to leave their club or whatever sport that they're playing, what are some of the cues that they should look at to say, okay, it's time? Like, I know it's time for my kid to go to a bigger pond.
Something I kind of evaluate with my parents now is I ask them like how successful is the kid in their current team.
Right.
So a lot of parents nowadays are so adamant about their kid is at that level.
Yes.
But they're not really the ones deciding that. And so there's two contributing factors. One is the parent and one is the athlete, right? But it's the mentality. So I always ask my parents, if a parent comes to me and says, I think my daughter should be on ECNL.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Well, are they scoring 4 or 5, 6 goals in a game right now in their current team?
Right.
Because ECNL is a big jump.
Yes.
Right? If that's the highest of the high and your athlete is not succeeding on their current team, how are you going to bounce onto that team? So that's kind of that evaluation process where you have to say, am I succeeding? Is this too easy for me?
Right.
Am I just dribbling through cones and scoring goals left and right in my premier division or whatever it may be, right? I don't. So that's something I ask the parents and even the athlete. I say, like, you may think you want to be there,
Right.
but do you know what it takes to be there? Are you putting in the extra reps? Are you putting in all that work that either those athletes are doing or that those athletes have already put in and has pretty much gotten them there, and now they're smooth sailing in that level.
Man, I love all those questions.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I talk to my parents about, and I'll ask them if they feel that their kid is ready. Then yes, go try out for them. But other than that, like it's a lot of money to invest just for a wish or like, I believe that my kid should be there. Well, it's hard. It's hard to play up there.
Do you feel like it's easier for you to have that discussion because, like, if a coach has it, then the parents sometimes think, they're just saying that to keep my kid. Do you feel like from a trainer's point of view, it's easier to have that discussion since you only train them to excel in their current environment? Like, whether they win the game or lose the game doesn't really affect you because it's not your team?
I think my approach is in the way that I run my gym, and like you kind of opened, what is my gym? I try to identify as a specified training gym, but at the same time, like I want to run it as an academy.
Right.
My goal is to grow an academy style space that covers what the highest level is doing,
Right.
which is strength, speed, recovery,
Right.
injury prevention,
Right.
soccer specific movement, all of that. So if I can run it that way, I'm also trying to mentor them
Right.
during that process. And I'd say like most of my kids carry my name.
Right.
right? So if you train in my gym and you're on the field and you turn the ball over every time you get it, that's not a good look on me.
Yeah. They're
So
representing your brand.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I want that pressure, and I want them to have that pressure.
Right.
So that's kind of how that works. And then say, I do kind of have a bias. I always ask my kids when they come back from tournaments or showcases, I say, well, how'd it go? Right.
Right.
I say, well, we lost 2 games. Okay, but what did you do?
Right.
Right. I say, well, we lost 3-0. That means nobody scored.
Right.
And if you're a forward, I have a problem with that.
Right.
Right. If
Right.
you're a defender, I have a problem with that. So things like that, I'll hold my kids accountable for sure.
Man, I love it how you have a vested interest in your players beyond, you know, them doing, power cleans or deadlifts and things like that. I love it. I mean, because when you work with kids, especially in the environment that you're in, like you said, you wear many hats, and you're not just like the, hey, this is what your workout of the day is going to be. Like, you're the psychiatrist for them too, and man, that plays a big part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a kind of, my space is a release. I
Right.
think. I think it's a place to get away from that normal training ground, that normal soccer environment, right? Some of these kids are being asked to train 3-4 times a week over in Utah specifically, and like I said, I definitely have an issue with it. I try to require my athletes to be in with me twice a week because I think that's what's necessary at this level to maintain the body, to continue to recover, stretch, remain mobile. Because a lot of parents, unfortunately, they just, in this day and age, like, they think the more soccer the better, but sometimes it's less is better, or less is more sometimes. And the practice schedule that these kids are being required to do, and parents are going to have something to say about it, right? They're the ones paying the fees. And so if they want their kid to be at practice, they're going to be at practice, and they'll probably skip out on my stuff. And that's sometimes where we run into trouble, because I think it's more valuable sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
I think
definitely.
when they're putting so much output, right? I always go over input and output. If you're not recharging the batteries and you practice 4 times a week, cold weather on turf, or super hot weather on turf, these kids' joints are breaking down.
Oh yeah.
So that's where I kind of have to educate the parent as well. And that's kind of what I do.
As you're saying this, I'm already like, all right, I know like 5 or 6 parents that I need to send this podcast to, because, people now, like, they overtrain,
Oh, absolutely.
and it's like, people fight back all the time. They're like, oh, we shouldn't take a week off. I'm like, what's it gonna hurt?
Yeah.
And they don't understand periodization. I don't know if that's a technical term they use in the facility and that you work with, but on the soccer side, it's like, we work year round to have them peak at certain times, and like, you can't be physically at your best year round, and you got to find certain times when you're going to be really fit and explosive, and then sometimes you're not pushing it as hard, because if you're trying to do that year round, like, you literally hear kids now with like 8-9-year-olds with stress fractures and things like that.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing kids now under 10 that have torn ACLs. Never heard of that 10-15 years ago. And some of it is because of the turf they train on, but people now are training like 5-6 days a week, and I'm like, take a day off. They're like, no, if we're not training with you, we're training with someone else. And it's just like, or they'll work with different trainers, and now, like, each trainer is training them to be at their peak, and the programs aren't meshing. So now you have the overtraining in it.
Yeah, and I think the topic that we touched on already is they're starting earlier.
Yeah.
Right? So if kids are tearing their ACLs at 13, 14 years old now, which is a little bit more reasonable, but still shouldn't happen.
Yep.
But it's because they're starting at 4 or 5 years old at club.
Yeah.
Like, how does that make sense? It doesn't. And I think the amount of repetition that these kids are being asked to accommodate is tough. So I think with the demand, you have to recover the body.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I run my gym, is I want to duplicate what's being done at the highest level. And so when people come in for a consultation, that's what I explain to them. I say, I'm going to try to run this as best I can. So when kids come back from their ECNL showcases on Monday, are we going to start slamming weights around? No. We're
Right.
going to stretch. We're going to go through some core work. We're going to try to reactivate, try to get things going, maybe some massage therapy, things like that. So, I mean, that's what's being done at the highest level. Like, I don't think if Man City is coming back from a Champions League game, those guys are crushing it on the field the next day. They're just not doing it. They're going to sit out, they're going to recover, go through regen, and they'll play their second team that next EPL game, right? So
Right.
there's load management, and I think that's such a misconception nowadays because it's more about money, right?
Yes.
What am I purchasing?
Right.
What does my investment
Right.
get me? And if I'm paying for soccer, then I want soccer.
Right.
If I want speed, I want my kid to be fast
Yep.
and get it done yesterday.
Yep.
And like you said, everything's just so available nowadays, right? So parents are like, I want it done yesterday and I want it done correctly.
Yep.
And why is my kid not succeeding? Why is my kid not on ECNL? Why is my kid not running 20 miles an hour? It takes time.
Oh yeah.
It takes time, but yeah, it's definitely a process. And
Well, once you said Man City, you're already my favorite guest now. I mean, that's
Yeah.
my club. So
absolutely.
you go from high school. Now you go into Santa Barbara to play Division One.
Mhm.
Is there anyone that kind of sparked what you're doing now at that, around that high school or be going in this Santa Barbara? Because I have an understanding that you trained at some big time facility down there, and I'm wondering if that sparked what you're actually doing now.
Absolutely. I would say my sports performance journey started when I was about 15.
Nice.
So I had a couple friends, baseball players in high school, a couple cousins that I was pretty close with, and they were training at a facility called P3, Peak Performance Project. And it was a pair of individuals that were running it at the time, Marcus Elliott and Phil Wagner.
Mhm.
Phil Wagner's actually up here in the Bay Area now doing
Sparta.
Sparta. Yep.
And for people that, can you just touch on it? It doesn't have to be big, a long spiel on it, but I mean, they kind of revolutionized, especially Phil. I mean, Phil in the Bay Area with his Sparta. You look at, I think it was at one point when Kansas won the national championship in basketball, they used the plates that Phil, maybe I think he helped design.
He was working on the force decks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he
And
was doing something like that.
So I've had players. He had a place out of Menlo Park, and they would work with the force plate. And then I know he got some patents. So can you talk a little bit about that facility briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's I would say one of my biggest influences. P3, they changed the game for me.
Yeah.
They changed the game for me. I mean, they're absolutely killing it now. I know Phil and Marcus, parted ways, but I think they're both brilliant.
Yeah.
I think what Marcus is doing now is really focusing on, so the analytics side is really
Yep.
what they did. So that was like the first initial introduction for me to like sports science.
Right.
So that's what they were doing. They were focusing on sports science. They were focusing on data collection and really combining technology with sports performance.
Right.
So the movements that they're doing in there is no different than what I'm doing, what any normal, personal trainer maybe or sports performance coach is doing. So
Right.
from trap bar deadlift to Bulgarian split squats, skaters, box jumps, all of that.
Yep.
They're doing that, but they're tracking
Yep.
how much force is being applied. Or do we have equal output on right leg versus left leg?
Yep.
How fast are we throwing this medicine ball? So they had speedometers in their freaking
Oh,
wall.
yeah.
It was awesome. So I think that's kind of what they did for me, was made sports performance fun, because I think a lot of people look at it as a chore.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's like, oh, I gotta go lift. Oh, my body's gonna be sore. Oh, I had to practice right now.
Right.
I don't really want to lift that heavy. And it's like, they made it okay to
Right.
do that. And it was just a fun environment, a
Yep.
fun culture to be in, from getting there and mixing your supplements together and having that access as a high school athlete. I mean, every kid thinks creatine is cool, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. Do they know why they're taking them? I don't know. At P3, you do.
Right.
It was educational for me. It opened up massage therapy. It opened up chiropractics to me. It opened up being able to care for your body
Right.
over that period of time that you're beating it up. So yeah, I mean the facility is awesome. Santa Barbara, California. If anyone's out there, obviously definitely go tap in. I know UC Santa Barbara tries to get down there and tap their players in, but I think they focus on NBA players for the most part right now. Tons of baseball players. They really work with the draft, NBA draft combine, and those players really going to the next level. But yeah, it was a huge influence on me, on my gym. A lot of movements. I don't want to say I took them from them. I mean, they're available movements, but the flow that they had, I kind of took some from that, and but just tons of other things I've taken as well from spending time with women's national team. You know, friends, ex teammates of mine that are in MLS, and taking stuff from performance trainers in MLS has been a big influence on me. So
what I liked about the facility that they had up here, and me being a soccer trainer, like I don't have any data like on hand. You know, it's like we do X, Y, and Z, and I just know over time it's going to make you successful. But they actually had data. They had the force plate. You would jump up. For people that don't know about the force plate, is you jump up like 3 times, and every time you landed, it measured some things. Do you remember the things? It measured like 3 things.
I mean, you're getting a little outside of my realm too, but because I have not used the force decks. I do have access. There's a company that I've been talking to about trying to get tapped into those, but basically they record ground contact time, velocity, and I want to say like the amount of force that we are applying into the ground. So there was a couple of different charts. Once again, they weren't necessarily for us at the time. I think they're doing better at showing the athletes what they're doing and accomplishing. But I think at the time for me, I was there early on. I mean, you're talking about 2005, I think, is when I started with them. So that was some time ago, and they've come a long way with technology has in general, right? So they have all the cool gadgets and just a great team over there. Overall, I know they have another facility out in Atlanta, opened a brand new one out there, and that place is rocking. So, but yeah, the force decks, they're pretty cool gadget if you know how to utilize them.
So you go on to Santa Barbara. How was your playing experience at Santa Barbara?
If I'm being completely honest, it didn't work out for me. It didn't work out for me. I'm a unique story, and I'm pretty open about it. I think anyone that knows me knows it was not a successful I don't want to say it was not a successful opportunity, but it just was not a successful experience for me. You know, if we're talking about transitioning from high school to college, or youth soccer to collegiate soccer, it's 2 completely different games. The collegiate level, the Division I level, and especially back when I played in 2008 to 2013, you're talking about a very physical game. Some big boys that were coming out of those teams, right? I mean, you got juggernauts like Akron at the time, Indiana, you know, the Will Bruins of the world, like just big, fast, physical boys. That's what college was. Soccer was not where it is now with technical skills, and ultimately the Big West was that. It was very physical. You had Cal Poly, you had Paul Holliker up in Cal Poly, you had George Coons down at Fullerton, or Irvine at the time.
He was at Irvine,
he was at Irvine. I know now he's at Fullerton. So yeah, just tough soccer, right? And you're talking about a running clock. There's some awkward subbing rules, and 50 kids on your sideline. And how are you gonna wiggle them in? So you're always battling for a spot, and that was kind of my experience. So transitioning from high school to that, it didn't go so well. I went from being on cloud 9, you know, Dallas Cup winner, national champion, all this kind of stuff, and then you get there your freshman year, you're 18 years old, and at the time for myself, Chris Pontius was a senior, a big name, you know, back out of Yerba Linda, and he got drafted by DC, played at DC for years, was in Philly, Galaxy, ended his career at Galaxy. So Chris is awesome. I mean, I wasn't going to play over him at 18 years old. And so when I got there, it was like, have a seat. You know, you're going to redshirt. And that's what I did. I redshirted, and It's tough not to play a meaningful game for a full calendar year.
Did you know that going in that you were gonna? The chances are that you were not gonna play as a freshman.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
You're told everything that you want to be told
Yep.
in the recruiting process, and you believe it.
Yep.
You're a kid, and especially with parents that didn't go to college, I had no idea.
Mm.
So you're told what you're told across the table. You sign your NLI, and you're ready to rock and roll. And you get there, like I said, what you learn quickly in college is that there's 35 other players just like you,
Yes.
right? The talent is there, the physicality is there, the IQ is there, but you got to wait your turn. Unless you're like some stud that
Right.
just absolutely, my good ex teammate Danny Barrera, he came out of residency as well,
Right.
so the U17 residency. Um, he came in and plopped in pretty quickly. And
So it sounded like you were in different ponds. You went from the AYSO to the comp pond, and then you did some ODP, and then you make this other jump from high school stud, club stud to now Santa Barbara, where you tend to struggle. Was that the first time where you just kind of like, this sucks. Like this
absolutely,
is, because it's one thing like you do the ODP, and if you don't make it at some level, you still have your club team to fall back to. So
hmm
it's like I didn't make the national team, but I still get to go back to my club team. There is no other club team. There is no playing other than your college team. So what did you do to kind of like work through that process?
uh, it was dark. It was dark for sure. I'm pretty open about that with people that are close to me. It was dark. It was a dark time. Freshman year was a dark time. You leave your family to go
Yep.
move into the dorms, and I think you kind of nailed it. Is I guess I'd never been cut from anything,
Right.
right? I had always made something. I made as varsity as a freshman.
Right.
I went to go train for 2 weeks with this brand new club, and I made it. I go to ODP and I made it. I made holdover. I made regional. I made, the only thing was national team that I didn't really make or
Right.
get a chance at the U17 World Cup, but I always made it,
Right.
and I was satisfied with my results. And then you
Mm.
get to go to college, and you're nobody.
Wow.
Your ego is crushed. You're just another player. You're just another tool in the shed,
Yep.
and either your time will come or it won't. And to be completely honest, I just don't think mine did. I think was I talented? Absolutely. But I think something that the kids are fortunate to have now is the transfer portal.
Right.
I didn't have that option back then. You feel stuck. You feel
Right.
like you're showing up to practice.
Right.
You're going to school. You're going to class. You're trying to get good grades, but
Right.
your psyche is not there, right?
Mm.
You're just not locked in, and so you struggle.
Right.
You struggle, and it's a tough time. It's a tough time for sure. And I guess you're just unsure because you don't really know who to talk to. Like
Mm.
who do I talk to? My counselor,
Right.
my administrators, your coach. Yeah, you can kind of go in there, but those are the guys you're mad at.
Yeah.
Why do you go talk to them?
Makes that conversation tough.
Yeah, so that was a really really tough time for me. It was a really big adaptation that I had to come through because, like I said, you're putting in all the same work,
Yeah.
and then you only get 22 games in a season roughly, and to play zero of them, it's heartbreaking.
Did you redshirt early in the process, or did they do it like?
No, there's no explanation. There's no communication, and like I said, maybe there is some programs where they call you in, they say, hey, you're coming off an injury, or hey, you're playing behind this senior, your next year's your year.
Yeah.
There was never any communication like that. It was just you were suiting up every game, and there was an order. It was an order,
Jeez.
right? You got a couple sophomores that would get subbed in, and so yeah, my freshman year was brutal. I mean, there was no communication whatsoever, and I think the system that they have there, it works. And
Right.
like I said, I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus. I think it's successful, but yeah, it's there was no explanation. You just show up, you practice, you work your butt off, you're doing the beep test just like everyone, you're lifting weights like everyone, and
Right.
then you suit up and you just sit there.
Jeez.
And that hurts. That hurts.
Man. I did a coaching course once in Augusta, Georgia, and Bill Beswick, who was one of the coaches at Manchester United, um, came out and he gave a speech and he said, you know, there's just different levels to everything. And he said training at Manchester United, he said, you know, the top 11, you know, they feel really confident. The next 3 players, because at the international level before COVID, you only got 3 subs. And he said, so now you have 14 players that kind of play a lot. The other, you know, 15, 20 players on the roster, those players are barely ever seeing the field. Maybe if there's, you know, people go on international duty and they come back injured, they'll get called in. But he said, like, people, you know, and then people go, oh, well, they're getting paid millions of dollars. And it's like, at the end of the day, these people all fell in love with the sport they played. And you identify as being a baseball player, a soccer player, a football player. And once you have that kind of stripped away from you or taken away, like it can be really tough. Did you have a happy ending at your story? Like, you know, did you come into your own your sophomore, junior, senior year? Or was it just kind of like, this is how it's going to be for the next 4 years?
Not really. No, like I said, I don't really have any significant memories there. I think I tried to scramble at the end,
Right.
My junior year. So I got a couple shots my sophomore year. You know, I redshirted. You know, on paper, like I
Right.
said, there was never any real discussion. There's no one that tells you that you redshirted. You just kind of find out
Jeez.
because you didn't play any official minutes, right? So you don't play any official minutes. Sophomore year comes around, you go through spring, you get some minutes, you start to kind of make your stamp. You're like, okay, the seniors are gone. I can
Right.
kind of make some noise here. But I think my sophomore year, I got a couple shots, and I mean, I would ask any athlete, don't play a game for one full year and
Yeah.
then try to go out there and play a game.
Yeah.
Your confidence is so shaky.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and especially at UC Santa Barbara. I mean, Tim's done a great job with the marketing out there. I mean,
Right.
he packs the house. I made some. Don't get me wrong. I played some big games. Like I got a chance to play against the U17 Mexican national team in front of. I think we got almost 20,000 out there.
Jeez.
I played against the U20s as well in a spring game, so I got some good experience there.
Right.
And I think what it really just came down to was that confidence.
Right.
I just didn't feel like the staff believed in me. And you're kind of, like I said, just a tool in the shed. And if you don't perform, you're not going to play. And that goes at any level.
Right.
So there's next one up. And if that person plays well, then you're kind of done. So that's kind of what happened sophomore year. I had a little couple stints here and there.
Right.
Didn't really make much noise. I just kind of stayed in my lane, and that hurt. And then junior year, same situation. Brought in great player Sam Garza. He was coming off an ACL from U20 national team. And yeah, I didn't get a chance to really put my stamp on my position, and so that's when I didn't play much again my junior year. And so that's when I had walked in and just said, hey, I think it's time for me to explore some other options. And so that was tough, but yeah, I ended up getting a transfer solidified up at Sac State, but that was more academics. I think from the UC system. I know I told you a little bit earlier, like the UC system transcript didn't transfer to the state system.
Right.
So unfortunately, I wasn't eligible to play when I transferred. So I got into the school. I was up there training, living, practicing with the team, and then Lindenberger basically called me in and just said, "Hey, like you're not eligible to play this year, so you're gonna have to pause and come back out in spring." And I was like, "Nah, this is not it." So that's pretty much where the story ended. I mean, I went back to UC Santa Barbara. I spoke to Tim Vomsteeg and I said, hey, is it possible to get my spot back? You know, can I come out in spring, work for it?
Right.
He said yes. I did come out. I earned my spot back. I was actually playing really good because I took about 6 months off. So I took 6 months off from school. I trained at P3.
Right.
I was a monster. I was running fast. I was jumping high. I was explosive. I was playing a lot of soccer. some good players to train with in Santa Barbara. And yeah, I just stayed sharp. And then I got up to Sac State, and I went from kind of being a forward to like a right back. And that didn't sit well with me, but I was still playing well.
Right.
And yeah, so I came back to Santa Barbara. I was playing well. But all of that transition from Sacramento for 6 months and taking time off from Santa Barbara for 6 months. It was like I didn't play really competitively for a year almost.
Right.
It felt like, and so my grades just suffered.
Mm.
It was just a lot on my psyche, and my grades suffered. I ended up, pretty much got excused from the university for about quarter, I think.
Wow.
Quarter, so about 3 months because my GPA was low.
Right.
But I was commuting from Lompoc, so I had to move back in with my parents. There was no housing, so I was commuting. I was working, trying to make money. So it was a lot. It was a lot for sure. And so what ended up coming of that is I just basically had to walk in and tell Tim and Greg Wilson at the time, I think he's still there, that I'm done. I said, I think I'm just going to focus on my studies. And this was started my 4th year, going into my 5th year, and just wanted to focus on my studies. And I did. And I graduated. I was, I believe, one of 5 of my freshman class to finish. So I came in with a class of 15, and I was one of 5 to graduate.
Big turnover.
Yeah. So that was, it was very successful for me. You know, I was very proud of my accomplishment, but yeah, soccer didn't work out so well. So
what was your journey like after, like if you can bridge the gap from when you left Santa Barbara to when you started your own facility in Utah?
I would say, well, my senior year, when that all happened, I was able to tap into the equipment director.
Okay.
So, ironically, Carlos Garcia, he's actually working up here now in Santa Clara.
At the university?
University of Santa Clara,
Nice.
yeah. And he is, I want to say he's more on the administrative side, so he might be like more of an AD now. But
Okay.
at the time, he was the equipment director. He hired me as an intern there, and so I tapped into that to help get my grades up because it was an internship for school
Nice.
credit. So I utilized that, and so I was working there for a little bit, just to stay involved in athletics.
Right.
I think it was important for me to still stay around sports, and that was when. So I worked there for almost 7 years after I graduated. So from my graduation in 2013 to about 2020, and then that was when I kind of parted ways when COVID hit. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty routine. It was boring. It was a job, right? I mean, you're shell shocked, and I think you kind of tapped on it. Is your identity is kind of stripped away, right? So you go through this identity crisis where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing,
Right.
You're supposed to go apply for jobs. You're supposed to, your parents are chiming in now. They're like, hey, come home. You got to make money. You got to buy a car. You got to do all this stuff. So ton of responsibility, but
They said, Vincent, it's time to be an adult.
Absolutely.
It's time to be an adult, man. You got to start. Yeah, this cell phone it's got to go out. You got to start paying for it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and I did the best I could, and that was kind of what it was at the time. So yeah, I think it kind of went hand in hand to still stay in athletics, but at the time I was slowly tapping in. I was like, I didn't really think this was forever for me. So that's when I started training people. That's when I've always had a connection with training people. It came easily to me to coach and to guide and to like I said, P3 laid that foundation for me. They're like, they would explain stuff to me, so then I would explain to my friends and say, hey, like, let's go lift. How are you so fit? How are you so doing this? And so I just transitioned that way, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna I think it was about 2017 that I had gotten my certifications.
Oh, nice.
So I kind of was like, you know what, I'm just gonna tap into this market and see where it takes me. And I had a couple of job offers in Santa Barbara at like some local gyms, but that's not really where I saw myself. I wanted to stay in sports. I wanted to be a sports performance specialist. I wanted to help people either become more athletic. I didn't want to work with, you know, just the generic client, you know,
Right.
to be a personal trainer. I didn't want to be a personal trainer. I wanted to stay in the sports side. So
You want to work with the big dogs, the people
yeah,
that they think of things different, and they're more likely. Elite athletes are fun to work with because people that have a carrot in front of them are more driven. If you just say, "Hey, go out and go hit the weights," you're like, whatever. Today I may want to do it. Tomorrow I might not. But if you're like, I've got to be in the best shape because I have this event coming up, you're most likely gonna get those people to work at their best. And it's me personally, I love working with elite players and stuff like that.
yeah, I think that's kind of where I saw myself. And once again, I kind of pay my homage to P3. I mean, they were working with pro athletes. I was like, I know a bunch of pro athletes. Like, how can I? And what I really kind of started to find out was the pro athletes are always looking for a place to train.
Always.
Like you said, they have to keep their discipline. They have to stay sharp. And that was kind of my motivation to slowly trickle into my own business. And I had been working part time with a business development firm in Montecito, California, and they were the ones that kind of laid that foundation
Right.
and said, "This is how you basically start a small business." Because
Nice.
I was helping develop some small gyms,
Right. Right.
and I was like, shoot, I can do this. So I was like, why don't I just do my own? But it was never going to happen in California. It's just too saturated of a market.
Yep.
I was never going to be, I'm not going to say I wasn't going to be someone, but
Right.
at the time, not really. Like in 2017, P3 was your spot. There's about 3 or 4 other like pretty well established spaces in Santa Barbara. So it was never going to work for me there. So that's when I had some connections call me, and that's when I slowly trickled my way out to Utah, and that was Luis Silva, who was my best friend out there, and my ex teammate / roommate at UC Santa Barbara. So he was actually playing with the Seattle Sounders at the time.
Oh wow!
And
Nice.
he contacted me, and he was like, "Hey, I kind of want to talk about life after soccer, and let's chat." So we did, and that's when he started to kind of want to connect. Basically, wanted to connect, and I thought it was brilliant. Was strength conditioning with soccer.
Right.
There's so many soccer trainers out there. There's so many people doing technical stuff, but nobody's incorporating any type of full operation of strength and speed and footwork, and making sure that they're still an athlete but also learning the ball work and the game itself. So
man, music to my ears.
Yeah, so that was a big one for me. So when he told me that, I was like, you know what, yeah, let's see if we can launch this thing. So I think just fast forward to COVID 2020 is actually when it all happened. So we were out in Utah for a brief stint and ended up making, I think I was prepping probably a lot of like his equipment and stuff. Like we were kind of like going through that like early stages, and then basically during the time of COVID, I was able to stay with him for some time.
Oh, nice.
And we started training athletes during that dead period where like you could still kind of get away with it. You weren't really breaking any rules or anything. So we would go out to some fields and we would train some athletes, and it kind of just picked up out there. But what actually happened was a lot of athletes' parents were interested in the section that I had. So Luis would actually run a good like 45 minutes of the session. I would only get about 20 or so just to do the initial activation and stretching and warm up. And parents were like, "How do we kind of work with you?"
Right.
And I was like, "Well, we can organize that. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of representing Luis's brand, and I didn't want to step on any toes.
Right.
So that was something I did out of respect for him, and I still very, very well respect his brand. And so slowly but surely, we I know he had his son in 2021, and that's around when I launched A to Z Training, and he was focusing on his brand. I was focusing on mine, but mine, just like I said, it just went the direction that it went with the strength conditioning, and then. But I've pivoted a handful of times. I mean, that's like any business.
Oh yeah.
I've pivoted multiple times from I was doing group trainings with those adult clients that
Yep.
I didn't want originally.
Right.
But you got to make money, you got to make sales, and that worked for me at the time. But I was utilizing that as experience, and it just kind of melted into what I have it now, which is that perfectly flowing space.
Well, let's roll up our sleeves a little bit and dive into the A to Z, because that's really why I wanted you on the podcast, because um, probably 5 years ago, and certainly during COVID, when I had kids initially go through the college recruiting process, they would get these um, packets right before they would get on campus. And it would be, the fitness packet. Hey, we're going to run the beep test or the yo-yo test, whatever, 2 miles in 12 and a half minutes, Cooper test.
Mm-hmm.
But they also would have a weightlifting program, and none of these kids knew how to weightlift. Like, they'd say, hey, do cleans, power cleans, hang cleans, deadlifts, whatever, push press, all these things. None of the kids knew how to do it. And so I always thought, like, how do you bridge that gap, not just skill wise from club to college, because I think that's a monster in itself, and you touched on that a little bit with your struggles freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
But just physically, a 17-year-old senior now having to play with 18 and 19-year-olds, sometimes 20, 21, 22-year-old, depending on what conference you're in, and things like that, and red shirts. Kids weren't physically prepared to play in college,
Mm-hmm.
and they always were successful club players. But all of a sudden, the only other time they played with older players is if they played up 1 year in club, or they were a freshman that made varsity their first year in high school. And so I wanted to have you on the show, is just to talk about, the thought process behind trying to get people physically prepared, because the internet and YouTube is great because it has so much information, but it never really addresses the why. So Vincent, I've seen 10-year-olds do deadlifts, and not that it's bad or just, but that stuff wasn't being done 10, 15 years ago. And so if you can kind of touch on, like, how the launch was for you from A to Z, and what was your kind of thought process behind that launch, because you had to kind of go out there on a limb, and you had some clients, but were you always sure that it was going to work out for you?
I don't think you ever really know that
Right.
it's going to work out for you. I mean, that's just business in general, especially when you're self-employed. But I'd say, the hunger is there,
Right.
right? So
Right.
the success is based off of what you're putting in. You'll get out what you put in, and I think I do put in the work, and that stems from the entire journey that I've told you in this whole podcast.
Yep.
Like, it's just there. It's instilled in me. It's that DNA, right? And even to touch on something that kind of hit home when you asked me, like, what was the final story? Like, I'm still living it. Like, I
Nice.
didn't really get that chance to put an exclamation point on my career. So this is kind of my passion that's still living, right?
Right.
And so that's what I put into my business. But as far as the implementation of strength training at all ages, I'd say. But I do want to definitely touch on the question you asked about really the packet situation.
Mm-hmm.
The universal packet is what I call it, right? So they give it to every athlete, whether you're a freshman coming in or you're on summer break or winter break, whatever. That's just a cheap way to say, hey, stay busy.
Right.
And I'm pretty honest about that. And I think what really makes me kind of have the upper hand on that is I was in collegiate athletics.
Yep.
I worked on one side of it, and I was an athlete on one side, and then I actually worked in that intercollegiate
Right.
era, right? So it's like I see what they're doing. I mean, like, I'm sorry to say, but the performance coaches don't get paid enough.
Right.
They're not going to write an individual packet for every single. They'll maybe for baseball they'll treat a pitcher differently than a catcher, and designated hitter different, or an outfielder different than some other person, right? But as far as soccer is concerned, because that's why we're here, is it's universal.
Yeah.
It's like, do some back squats, do this, do that, and it's like that athlete may not need that.
Yes.
That athlete may not need that. So that's kind of where I come in, and I'm hopefully, as I've always done, kind of go against the grain.
Yeah.
I kind of want to ruffle feathers because I've always had those questions. Like,
Right.
why?
Right.
Why are we doing that? Why do we have to do that, right? Why are old school coaches making people line up and do suicides?
Yes.
What is suicides, right? Like, what is, I don't know, even Chelsea eights, like just different things, right?
Right.
There's these funky drills that, like, I get it. We need to be conditioned,
Right.
but the technology's there. The data analytics are there.
Yep.
The people that are actually utilizing them to their benefit are the most successful teams.
Yep.
I don't think for the actual output, it goes hand in hand. Like I said, if a kid is fast, does that mean they're a good soccer player? No,
Right.
that absolutely is not the case. But for athleticism, yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
But like I said, the packet, it's universal. It's like, hey, I'm not getting paid that much. I'm not writing I got 6 other teams I need to write packets for.
Right.
I'm not doing this for all 60 to 105 and 150 players that I have.
Right.
So here's the packet. Stay busy over break, and we'll see who did it when you get back.
Right.
And I've always said the fitness test, beep test, Cooper test, all of that.
Yeah.
That's psychological.
Yeah.
That's like, can you battle?
Yep.
Can you dig deep? Can you come in at that time? Because some people can.
Yeah.
Like I was not a good beep test taker. My quads were huge. Like they filled up by the time all the cutting was done.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have the VO2 max to get through it. So I'd always get by.
Right.
Like I was fit enough to play, but I wasn't scoring 17s, 18s, all that. Like we had some studs on the team that were, but were they good soccer players? I don't know. You'd have to make that decision yourself. But that's what I'm saying is like just because you're a good athlete doesn't make you one or the other.
Right.
So that's kind of how the gym operates, really. Like that's my philosophy. That's my mentality is can we combine athleticism with sport specific? Like the stuff that I'm teaching in my gym, it has to translate to the field.
Right.
If you're fast in my gym, great. But if you're not blowing by anyone on the field or using it, then why are you coming to me?
Exactly.
So everything has to translate, and that's kind of the environment that I want to provide.
Can you tailor your workouts for different athletes? You know, like a midfielder compared to a back, and a back compared to a forward, and even a goalie. Can you tailor your workouts?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I do. I want to specialize in that. And that's why I consider myself a specialized soccer trainer, right? Because that's exactly it. Like a goalkeeper is not going to train like a forward is. So I'm doing more upper extremity. I'm doing more core work. I'm doing more shoulder protection, mobility for my goalkeepers. They're diving on side to side. I'm going to go over lateral movement with them constantly.
Right.
I'll go over jumping,
Right.
Ankle strength because they're coming up, leaving their feet, and they're leaving themselves vulnerable. You're going to train a forward a little bit differently. You're going to train a little bit more explosive, right? But for my field players, they're gonna train accordingly. But I think where I differ is reading their load management, right? If you're coming back from a tournament, like I always ask my team or my athletes, what do you have going on this week?
Right.
What are we prepping for? We'll have a showcase. I'm leaving Thursday.
Right.
Okay. Well, am I gonna crush you on Wednesday? No, I'm gonna prep you so that way when you get to the hotel, and I'm going to give you some work to do when you get to the hotel. Your band activation,
Nice.
your regen, whatever it is, right? And then when they get back on Monday, we go through that same situation.
What's a typical training cycle look like? Do you say you're getting a player ready for Dallas Cup? Mm-hmm. Do you count back from Dallas Cup, say it's in March or April? Do you count back to see how many months, or like how long is a cycle? Because I feel like people that don't know how to train athletes, they just put these random, if they're trying to get them to be stronger, they, a lot of heavy stuff if they want them to be faster. But I notice that people that are experts in their field, they put them on a cycle. And I realized it when I started doing CrossFit. I know CrossFit has like, a reputation of, if you do this, you're going to get hurt. But one of the things I learned, like, for example, when we did back squats was I was always like, okay, if I'm going to get stronger at back squats, I would just do back squats all the time. And they had us do things like tempos and, 3 seconds down, hold at the bottom, be explosive to come back up. And that got me a lot stronger than just doing normal back squats. So, and we would go like on a cycle for maybe like a month.
Mm.
and then at the end of the month we would test, and my strength was like through the roof, and I'm like, wow, I got stronger, not just doing like back squats, like, up and down, doing different variations, but we only did cycles of a month or two and things like that. Are there cycles that you guys work through? So if you're trying to get someone to be ready for, say, an event, is it like a 6 week cycle maybe, or four week, or 2 or 3 month?
Yeah, I'd say around 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks for my athletes, just because soccer's year round.
Yeah.
You have to kind of create benchmarks. You
Right.
got to create, goals for them as well, right? So, and you're gonna see constant fluctuation.
Yep.
I mean, I know that's a big one for whether it's an injured athlete or an athlete that's in season. I got, athletes that will be sprinting at 18, 19 miles an hour on my treadmill, or we'll get some GPS tracking on them or whatnot. And you're like, wow, you're killing it. And then they go into high school season, and I only see them maybe like once a week, kind of twice a week, maybe. And they come out of season and we'll retest, and they're running at like 16, 17 miles an hour. Why?
Wow.
Because their output is just completely dropped.
Yeah.
So basically, they're just not sprinting enough, right? Because why? They're practicing, like in Utah, I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and they play Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Jeez.
Like, that's terrible.
Where's the recovery?
There is none. And that's where I try to step in. I'll say, hey, come in, let's get some stretching, let's get some massage, let's get some, some core work, something that's, or some heavy lifting even. So I would usually lift heavy with them on Monday. So the way that my cycle works is I like to do power stuff on the first end of the week.
Right.
Get them loading, and then they're gonna be pretty sore from that.
Right.
So can they reduce their soreness by the end of the week?
Right.
So then the second time I see them, it's gonna be more core based, more upper body, more activation, and then on the back end of the week we'll go like more agility based, soccer specific stuff. But I don't touch the ball every session with them.
Right.
So most of it is there to kind of cover all the bases,
Right.
because you have to.
Right.
If I just sit there and focus on strengthening and jumping and power and power and power, eventually something's gonna go.
Yes.
So you have to balance it out. And I always like doing strength, obviously with plyometrics,
Right.
but then the plyometrics have to turn into fatigue,
Right.
and then we touch the ball. Like, can you still train? Can you still connect passes?
Right.
Can you still make good decisions
Right.
with tired legs, tired minds? And that's where I kind of differ.
Do you do all the programming for your athletes, you personally?
So I'm a one-man show.
Oh man.
Yeah, I have some help. But it's not necessarily specific. I definitely don't necessarily write packets.
Right.
If that's kind of what we're getting at. I don't think that works for my gym.
Right.
Now, if I'm solely focused on that, then and I'm a weightlifting coach, then that's different. But
Right.
because I'm covering all those bases, I go as far as doing video analysis, so
Right.
going over game film with athletes, trying to teach them the game, trying to teach them. Like I said, I have a high IQ. Like
Right.
that doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
So now you're kind of just sharing that with a player that doesn't see the game like you do. And I still love the game, so I still watch everything. I'm still analyzing EPL players. I'm still watching the newest best players.
Right.
So it's not like I stopped that. I think that's what happens is sometimes people just get away from the game.
Right.
But I still love the game. Like, I still want to share that with these kids who aren't being exposed the way I got exposed to
Right.
it. And I think that's what makes me different as a trainer. It's more of a mentorship, right?
Yeah.
It's more of a guidance factor that you want to provide for these kids, because especially in Utah, like I'm sorry, but they don't have it.
Right.
They don't have it. There's a big disconnect between California to Utah.
Oh yeah.
Like right now, and I don't blame the kids. It's just the system that's implemented there. It's like right now they're shut down for a good 5 months. Because they're expecting snow, you're expecting winter storms, so they're training indoors, limited field space.
Right.
There's about 3 or 4 major indoor facilities there, and you're talking about maybe 12, 15 teams every hour. On those spaces, the fields are divvied up into like eighths, and that's where they're training.
It's not enough field space.
No, not a chance. So And so these kids are being required to be there about 4 times a week as well, and that's crazy. That's crazy. So that's where I'd say that disconnect is, and it definitely shows.
Do you work with clubs like La Roca, and
Hmm.
is that work? Because I
Yeah,
think that's
so
probably the.
La Roca is one of the popular ones. Utah Avalanche as well. So Avalanche
Oh
is
yeah, that's a good club.
Those are the two ECNL programs, and then you have Celtic and Wasatch. Those are the two GA programs for the girls side. But majority of my athletes are actually female. So I technically, I don't want to say I specialize in female, but that's the majority of my clients is mainly on the female side, because I think they're the ones that are pretty much tapped into the injury prevention side as well, because all the ACLs.
I was gonna say, I mean, ACLs is huge
Yeah.
on the girls side.
Yeah, so that's a big following of mine. So a lot of the girls, and then over there, it's kind of a popularity thing. So like once you kind of tap into one market, the next girl's knocking on the door and trying to get some work in. So it just kind of grew that way. And I like to say the boys are at that age, and I was one of them. Is that ego factor?
Oh yeah,
Right? It's like, well, I'm good. I'm not injured. I'm already fast.
right,
I'm being seen. I'm being recruited. So I don't need what you're offering.
right.
And I'd say that's kind of that high school boy age group that doesn't need help right now.
Any hurdles along the way that you hit once you formed the company?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think buy-in, right? I think buy-in, because you're dealing with parents that don't know, and I think that's a big factor. We touched on it earlier, which is the parent is investing. They're the one who's paying.
Yep.
So they want to know what they're paying for.
Oh yeah,
But if they don't know that that's what it takes to be at a high level, or that me or anyone knows what we're doing, they're not going to pay. They're not going to want their kid there.
yeah,
And so I think for me, the biggest hurdle is educating the parent,
Yep.
or recruiting the parent.
yep,
Because it's one thing to have the athlete will probably 9 times out of 10 be good if the parent knows
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
going on.
Well, they don't have a choice at the young age.
Yeah.
The parent makes the decisions.
So that's kind of what I'd say the biggest hurdle is over there, is the mentality
Right.
of these parents, the mentality and the culture over there.
Right.
Over here, it comes easy. I mean, I've been here for a week, and I've got plenty of people
Oh yeah.
asking to train. And, I got a good group of girls out here that love my work, and
Yeah.
I love working with them. So I'd say that's probably the biggest hurdle is really just battling with the scheduling,
Right.
what's being asked of these kids. Some of them are dead sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I have multiple phone calls and parents asking, well, hey, we can't make it this week. Hey, we can't do this because we got to be at this
Yep.
5 other things.
Yep.
And that's a lot.
Yeah.
It adds up. So, and I respect them. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. Like I don't have any animosity towards them about
Right.
it, but I definitely have an opinion,
Right.
because it sucks. It hurts to see them either step away from my training, or to feel like I don't like it's not appealing at that moment.
Right.
So of course you're gonna take it personally. I mean, it's my business. It's my baby. So I'm gonna have something to say.
Well, soccer's gone through this evolution. It went through, like, when I first started playing, there weren't any full-time coaches. You barely even, I mean, most of the coaches were parent volunteers. And then we went through the evolution of paid coaches. And now there was still parents that worked like a 9 to 5 and then coached afterwards. And then you saw the evolution of full-time coaches like myself. That's all we do. And then once that started happening, you started seeing the market of coaches doing clinics. And you see a lot of dribbling and people doing all these core word drills and things like that. The next evolution is, and this is where, like, the facility down in Santa Barbara, certainly the Sparta facility in Menlo Park, is people are now investing in the analytics of what they get out of the training with you, but also building of the body. And I think as each time we go through this evolution, there becomes like a lag of before it becomes mainstream. And I think you being in Mountain View and Los Altos, everyone does it now. But in Utah, you talk about culture. You're having to teach people and educate. Down here, you don't have to do that as much. Every kid, almost in most of the clubs, is doing some type of private training, and now they're doing stuff to physically help them. But in Utah now, it sounds like that you're having to educate not only the parent, the player, but telling the club coach, because the club coach hasn't really bought into it yet, because the less they spend with the club coach, the less they have control over the player. And a lot of times it boils down to, I don't want you working with someone else because it's the control stuff. How are you now having to deal with that?
I mean, I don't know if this podcast is gonna make its way to Utah, but hopefully.
Oh, it will. I got friends in there.
There's,
Kai Edwards, I know coaches in
we
Utah.
might have to tap in with Kai. I'm pretty close with Kai myself, and I think that's the biggest question. I've actually had conversations with Kai about that. I think that's some of the stuff he experiences when he's recruiting as well. I mean, it's just, but I think you hit the nail on the head. It's this control factor.
Yeah.
It's a flat out control factor. I mean, it's anything from being looked at sideways when you're out at a field doing some speed training, or like, who is this guy? What is his resume? What is this?
Yep.
And the funny thing is that my resume is probably better than half of the coaches out there, but I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I don't, if I wanted to become a club coach or soccer coach, I would probably have done that, but
right.
I wasn't interested. I enjoy the independent, private sector. I enjoy, training kids individually or in a, I'd say a smaller group. I definitely don't like to identify as group training because everyone's usually doing something different.
Right.
But yeah, that's the biggest battle. The biggest battle is educating, and then, like I said, I don't think I really have to experience that,
Right.
because I'm not competing with them.
Yeah.
You know, so they may look at me sideways, but I definitely don't look at them sideways. I have my opinions.
Right.
Everyone does. Everyone's entitled to them. I'm sure people have opinions on me and what I do, but I think if you can block out that noise, you're kind of just fine.
Right.
But I think what you said is huge, because that is the biggest difference.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to find people that would want to look for my service here in California. Over there, it's like, I'm still educating, and I would love to educate coaches too, because that is what's going on over there. The majority of the coaches over there do have full-time jobs.
Yep.
They're not solely focused on just soccer,
Yep.
and so it shows. But hey, I mean, to each his own. I'm not there to change the soccer culture. I'm not there to change them as people.
Right.
I'm going to try to implement what I can, and those that want to follow and jump on board, they're more than welcome.
What are some of the misconceptions? Because, like, people go, oh, if we'll say, like, female athlete, oh, if they lift too much, they're going to get bulky and less mobility. What are some of the misconceptions that you hear out there, and you're just like, man, that's like an urban
myth?
Yeah, like, and this is really going to be the benefit that you're going to get out of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely the physical changes.
Right.
I think some people are nervous about that, but I think it's been made trendy now. To be honest, I think it is trendy to be fit, to be a fast, explosive athlete, and But as far as misconceptions, I think it's just this. It's another. What's the word, like? It's another commitment, and I think that's what people are scared of.
Yep.
They're like, "Ugh, we got to go to that now. Oh, we got to pay more money."
Yep.
Oh, but it's like, if you know what you're investing in, that is what's huge. And I'll be honest. I mean, I think I'm gonna do a better job this year in 2024. That's huge for me, is to do a little bit more marketing on that side.
Right.
I think this last 2-3 years was early stages. It was more organic. It was like, I'm gonna stay under the radar.
Right.
But I think I've established myself well enough now, tapping in even back here in California. So having the respect of not only California, but also Utah,
Oh yeah.
working with professional athletes out there, even I think people are kind of seeing, okay, this guy's arrived, and that's exactly what I wanted. So the misconceptions can be there,
Right.
but if these players are coming to me,
Right.
that should say enough,
Right.
right? And um, you like even for myself, and I've said this more often than not recently, is I'm no longer a soccer player.
Right.
I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I'm a sports performance, instructor, I guess you can say, or a speed coach. I'm now looking at the best
Right.
that are doing that.
Right.
I'm not watching. Do I love Cristiano? Do I love Messi? Did I watch them when I was playing? Absolutely.
Oh,
but
yeah.
now I'm looking at the Les Spellmans.
Yep.
Now I'm looking at the Tony Hollers. Now I'm looking at the bigger names in sports performance division and seeing what they're doing. That's who I want to duplicate
Oh, yeah.
now. So outside of that, like having the professional athletes, that's going to speak for itself.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and that's kind of where I'm at is you either jump on board or you don't. I say sink or swim.
Yep.
And hopefully you're not sinking.
I tell parents all the time they should make time for their kids to spend time in the sports performance realm. Um, and when I first tackled it with my teams, parents were like, well, we already do 3 times a week. We don't have the time.
Mhm.
And I had a bunch of kids go to regional camp and they played against the SoCal girls.
Mhm.
All the SoCal girls were doing it. And my parents were like, man, my daughter got tossed around when she went down there. And so we trained 3 days a week. They started doing sports performance 2 days a week. And I was like, you were the same parent that didn't have the time. You magically have the time now. And so if it's important to you, you'll make time.
Absolutely.
And they did it. But sports performance is one of those things where like it's just different for the parents to evaluate. Like if I'm working on you shooting and you go out and work on shooting for the next 2 or 3 weeks, even a parent that's never played soccer can see the improvement because they go, oh, you scored more goals. But with the sports performance, the advantage of you getting a step faster or just a little bit stronger takes a little bit longer to see. And so it's harder for the parents to buy in. But for any parent listening to this podcast, like get your kids into it because it's going to pay dividends. And if you're going against someone who's spending a little bit of time training their body and you're not doing it, you're going to pay the price of it on the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing on that is longevity.
Yes.
Longevity is I mean, to play all the games, to play all the minutes, to play all of that, like only the best players. I know at the highest level, it's basically described as the best teams are the ones that can recover the fastest.
Yes.
If you play a game on Tuesday and you got to play on Friday, it's recovery.
Yep.
It's did you put in the work in the off season? Do you have enough muscle mass to withstand? Are your joints strong enough? Are your tendons strong enough? The people that are breaking down are the ones that are dehydrated, the ones that are not eating well, the ones that don't sleep well, all of the above. And so it goes. It's all the other aspects that make you a good athlete. So you can't come, like I said, don't come to my gym and tell me like, oh, I think my kid should be doing this, but they sleep like crap, they eat like crap, and tell me they're a good player. It's not going to happen. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and I think that's really what the ultimate message from my space is I'm just trying to duplicate what's being done at the highest level. And if I can't offer it,
Right.
I'm gonna at least tell you,
Right.
right? Like I know a big one for me is chiropractics. Like I've been pushing that on my athletes. I say chiropractics is huge.
Oh, yeah.
I can't do it, but if you can go somewhere and get it done and your tailbone's not out and your hips are back in their sockets and these kids are beating up their bodies.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to put it back where it needs to be. And that's really what I would say is it's going to help over the course of the time you decide that you want to play. But other than that, like you're just breaking down your body.
Since you had a chance to be around high-level players at Santa Barbara, and when you work with this facility and at Santa Barbara too, you worked with them at the college or you were around them at the college, then the facility, and now you work with high-level players here in Los Altos and Mountain View, training some players, and certainly in Utah. Are there any values that you've learned that you would give to players? Because again, you're more than just a strength and conditioning coach. You're a psychiatrist working with these players. Are there any values that you would give to players and say these are things that should be important to you?
I think that what I've learned from the pro athletes, at least, because that's what everyone's striving to be. One in particular that I can think of, it sounds kind of cliche or corny, but the grind never stops.
Yes.
It's until you are done playing soccer or any sport at a high level, it doesn't stop.
Yep.
It does not stop, whether that's eating well, like I said, eating well, drinking well, sleeping well, getting up and going to the gym. The best players they have the highest discipline.
Yep.
They've made sacrifices at the highest level, and they're the most disciplined.
Yep.
And that's really the only difference between the pro division and an amateur or youth player is are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to wake up before school? If you're out of shape, are you willing to wake up and go run those couple miles before school starts?
Yep.
Are you willing, when you're tired after school or you haven't had much to eat, to go get that lift in?
Yep.
Are you willing to drive a couple extra hours to that team that's really good,
Right.
but you're not sure if you wanted to make that drive? And this like I said, I don't really come at the kids. I come at the parents.
Yeah.
My dad didn't have all the best resources. I didn't have all the best resources, but I was ready to rock and roll, and I was disciplined. I didn't get to where I got to because I wasn't disciplined.
Right.
I didn't get to where I got to because I didn't sacrifice things. I sacrificed friendships. I sacrificed parties, hangouts,
parties,
all
anniversaries,
of those, all the distractions, and family, really just family. So that's a big one for me, is making sacrifices and making or staying disciplined.
Right. For the parent that hears, because I think that's a model that's certainly shifted in the last 5 years, the grind doesn't stop. But can you touch on, like, certain parents hear that and they go, okay, now my kid should lift like 10 times a day because that's the grind. And one of the things that you touched on I thought was very important is not only did you say the work on the field, but the nutrition and the sleep. How do you educate the parent that's listening in? Because I know just being in the soccer landscape and even watching AAU basketball and baseball, people now take the grind doesn't stop as like my kid's on the field working, and now you start getting into that overuse and stuff. How do you tap into the parents and say the grind doesn't stop, but it's not just what you do on the field, it's the sleep, the nutrition. How do you tap into that?
Well, you can go buy an Oura ring. You can buy a Whoop.
Yep.
You can buy any one of these little technologies, these wearables nowadays that can track basically output versus input. Once again, that's the difference. It's like if you're breaking down your body, if you just did a 2-hour practice and you go have McDonald's, that's probably not going to be good nutrition. That's probably not the protein you need. That's probably not the amino acids you need, right? An easy one. I'll give you an easy one. The amount of parents that send their kids to practice with water versus the amount of parents that send their kids to practice with electrolytes. I don't know, do the math. Like, I mean, there's instances that kids get lightheaded. There's instances because they don't have enough sugars or potassium or sodiums in their body.
Yep.
They don't have, so little things like that a parent doesn't know.
Yep.
Or they'll say, hey, take this syrup Gatorade.
Yep.
Drink that. It's probably better than no electrolytes,
Yeah.
but it works. But as far as like the actual differences between sleeping and not sleeping, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
If your kid's going to sleep at 11 and they have a game at 8 a.m., I don't know, do the math.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. I think there's just so many distractions nowadays, right? The kids are on their phones, they're on the iPads, they're on whatever device that they want to be on, and they don't focus on what's important. And see, like I said, I don't think we had those distractions when I was growing up, and It's changed. It's changed,
Oh yeah.
but what I'd say to that is you there's things to help you balance,
Yeah.
right? To create that balance. I mean, you don't need to go out there and lift 10 times harder just because you hear this podcast. You don't need to um, go clean out your fridge now because you have a ton of Gatorade in there because you
Right.
hear this podcast. Like, no, it's just simply make little changes
Yep.
that can help benefit. Because some things are probably already working for you.
Yes.
So it's not that. It's just probably implementing something simple
Yep.
or simple changes. So some things that I do with my kids over there is like, can we eliminate soda?
Yep.
Can we eliminate the fast food?
Yes.
If we're having fast food 4 times a week, can we drop it to 3? And then by 2 months from now, can we drop it to 2? Can we drop it to 1? And then slowly filter out of it.
Yep.
Because it's like anything, you can't just go cold turkey.
Oh yeah.
You have to ease out of these habits that have been embedded in these kids. But it's something very simple.
Right.
Something as simple as doing, I don't know, 20 sit-ups before
Yep.
bed.
Right.
Can we get to 60 sit-ups by 2-3 months down the road?
Right.
Things like that.
Oh, I like that.
There's little implementations, but all that stuff's available to us now.
Right.
And I don't think it's not rocket science. It's not anything super complicated. It's just a matter of staying disciplined and implementing it.
Is there any signs that parents could look for on overuse? Because now with like baseball and soccer and basketball, like the big thing is tournaments, right? And so, it's like you go from you do, back to back tournaments, and parents go, oh, that's 2 weekends. I'm like, yeah, but from one weekend to another, it's only 7 days. So you see now kids are playing like 6 games in 7 days. And what are some of the signs that, because parents are afraid of rest. Like rest is the enemy now. And when you hear like LeBron James talk about his regimen, he's always saying, man, I get 8 hours of sleep. And so what are some of the signs that parents can look at where they go, okay, my kid, like, we want that grind game, we're all in, we want the kids working 100%, but what are some of the signs that you go, okay, that kid actually needs 2 days off or they need a week off?
Yeah, I think once again, it's up to the parent if they're not educated to educate themselves.
Right.
I think what happens is they get caught up into like, oh, I paid money and I dropped my kid at practice. Why is my kid not good?
Right.
But like you said, look at what LeBron James is doing.
Yeah.
Do they know what LeBron James is doing? Do they know what Cristiano is doing? Do they know what a top level athlete is doing? It doesn't have to be one of those 3 icons or
Right.
Messi or whoever. Look at just a regular professional athlete. Look what they're doing. It's available.
Yep.
Most parents have Instagram.
Yep.
Most parents have access to the internet or YouTube. Look up what does a professional soccer player do in the off season?
Yeah.
What do they do during the week? The information is there. The problem is no one's willing to read it anymore.
Yep.
Everyone just wants it done
Yep.
like that. So it doesn't work like that. And you have to do your research. You have to do your homework.
Yep.
And so I would tell a parent to do their research.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, because they have to educate themselves to help out the kid.
Oh yeah.
And if they're not, then yeah, it's going to be probably a recipe for failure.
Yep.
And it's sad, but that's really what it comes down to.
Right.
Is the parent and the athlete have to be on the same page.
Right.
Because otherwise, if I always say in my gym, like, I don't want the parent to want the kid in my gym more than the kid wants to be in my gym.
Oh yeah.
They have to want to train.
Yep.
And then vice versa.
Yeah.
I'll have the consultation. I'll say, hey, you have to want to pay to be in here regardless and understand what you're investing in.
The buy-in.
Yeah.
The buy-in.
It's the buy-in aspect.
One of my favorite club teams is Real Madrid, and I read an article on the sleep study they did. And so at their facility, they actually have rooms where the players, each player had a room where they could go to sleep in.
Mm-hmm.
And when they went to, like, they play in the Champions League and they travel, they send people ahead to look at their cafeteria, the hotel. Real Madrid wants to prepare all the meals. So the hotels they stay at are only hotels where the Real Madrid chefs can go in there and prepare the meals. But they also have someone that goes in and looks at each hotel room and makes sure that they can get a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If the air quality isn't up to snuff, they put things over the filters to make sure that the air quality in the room. And I'm like, I'm looking at, like, Cristiano Ronaldo, and they had, Beckham, and the real, to me, the real Ronaldo,
Mm-hmm.
not the Cristiano Ronaldo.
R9.
Yes, R9. And for people who don't know who that is, Google him. He's big, even after the ACLs, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But here's $1 million athletes, and they're taking time off. They're getting rest. Of course, they have the chefs and everything that prepare the meals, but you know, there's all these stories of all these athletes training on the field, but also like what they do to recover,
Mm-hmm.
and doing like 3 or 4 workouts year round daily. Yes, you'll see your body improve in some points, but then your body's going to start breaking down. And you're seeing now the amount of stress fractures that kids have like at a young age is just, it's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blown away now if kids are like, you know, you know, 11 years old, stress fracture. And some of it is like training on turf is hard on the body, but you have these kids that are doing like box jumps 3 or 4 days a week outside in the constant pounding, and it's just like, and then the parents like, hey, my kid can't, they can't train for the next 12 weeks because their body's just, they need to recover, and you're just like, whoa, I've never heard of that stuff before.
Yeah, I think, well, going back, even something you said earlier, which is like, what can a parent do?
Right.
I think what I try to educate my parents is advocating for
Yep.
your athlete.
Yep.
But you have to be educated,
Yep.
right? You have to know why you're telling the coach, my athlete shouldn't play today.
Yep.
And that's where I would say standing up for the kids,
Yep.
right? So standing up for your athlete, advocating for them, going to talk to the coaches, explaining X, Y, and Z. I have some parents that do it and they have no problem doing it, but there's other parents that are like, oh my gosh, we have to be at this practice.
Yep.
Oh, my daughter's not going to play, or my son's not going to play if we don't go to this practice. Because like you said, that's that control factor.
Mm-hmm.
Say, oh, well, you have to be at 4 practices. If you're not here, then you don't play. And that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not fair to the kids. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big one. And just really, really educating yourself on what's being done at the highest level and trying to implement it into your regimen.
Right.
Like I said, it's available information. It's not, it shouldn't be too hard.
Right.
I would say that's what's most intriguing to me, kind of like what you're saying is
Right.
like these studies are going on, or these certain things are going on at a high level. But we can probably ask 100 parents, and I bet you maybe one would have known that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like most people ask me, like, oh, what is the VO2 max device that you have? Like,
Right.
why are you doing VO2 max?
Right.
Look what's being done at the highest level. Like, I don't see Real Madrid, when I see their weightlifting sessions, I don't see anyone with 300 pounds on the bar.
Oh, none of them.
I don't see anyone with, crazy, power. No one's power cleaning.
Yep.
No one's power cleaning for soccer.
Yep.
But then you go to a college environment for soccer training, power cleans.
Yeah.
Power cleans, pull-ups, like, I don't know, just things that aren't necessarily beneficial to the performance in the game.
Yep. Well, and a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, let's be honest, like if you're at a school that, has football, a lot of times that football strength and conditioning coach is also the one for soccer. Like
Yep.
they don't have one that's soccer specific.
Exactly.
But there are some that are out there in the bigger schools. I know some schools personally in the SEC, like they have soccer specific, and the training's different. But if you go to like a smaller school, they don't have that, and the training is different.
Mhm.
But I had a player down at USC, and the training that she had was much different than what she had at Boston University, just because the football program at USC was bigger, so they had more money, and so they were, and so I don't really want to get into all the other stuff, but they were able to do more soccer specific stuff.
Yeah.
And the player down there, she felt great,
Yeah.
and she was healthy, said as fast as she's ever been, stronger, and that was because she had a soccer specific strength and conditioning coach.
Yep. Yeah. No, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. I mean, even at the pro level,
Yeah.
like I talked to one of my players. He was over at Montreal Impact, and he was telling me the same thing. Like, there wasn't a lot of real attention to detail with sports performance. I think sports performance at the professional level is more of an option.
Mm-hmm.
It's implemented into the warm-ups, which
Yep.
is kind of like what I get into, where it's like where I create that flow with like band activation, resistance band training, dynamic stretching, like all of that. But Other than that, the soccer coaches want to get on the field and they want to knock the ball.
Yep.
And they want to go over tactics and they
Yep.
want to go over what their game plan is, but they don't really give a lot of time. So then you're going to ask the athlete to stay another, hour or two after the session to get sports performance stuff. Most of them want to go home.
Yep.
Right? They're at the facility for almost 6 hours a day. It's tough. It's hard on their body. But once again, what does it go back to? Sacrifice, discipline.
Yep.
And the top players that I know, they're hanging at the facility. They are getting their strength training in. They are getting a massage afterwards. They are doing contrast after.
Oh yeah.
The youngsters, the rookies, they're probably looking to go home and go play FIFA. Eat whatever, and it shows, right?
Oh, yeah.
But as they get the more dedicated ones, they'll change. They'll change their ways.
Where do you see yourself in the next 2 years? What's next for you? As this company that you started is growing, what's that next 2 years look like?
I've started a small project right now, so the lease on my building that I'm in currently is just that. It's another 2.5 years.
Okay.
So I'm gonna really lock in there and really try to build the space to be more of a lab style feel for these soccer players, to make sure that they're getting all the tools and resources they need to be successful. So that's cosmetic, but as far as my goals and my journey is a small project that I've been working on with the younger group of athletes that I have, which is my U11 or my U12s. I have about 15 girls right now that I've created a small team with.
Right.
And so that's A to Z Academy.
Nice.
And basically what I'm doing with them is I'm trying to implement that flow into that soccer space. So I didn't want to be a soccer coach, but I have a philosophy on how I want to see the game played.
Right.
Which is going to lead you towards that Pep style, that Barca, Man City 1 and 2 touch soccer that I think builds.
Saying on my favorite teams.
Yeah,
Man, I love it.
And I want to see these kids learn the right way.
Right.
But without distracting them.
Right.
Like I can't pull them from their club teams. I'm not collecting club fees, nor do I want to start a club. But I'd say, like I said, my goal is to implement these select teams.
Nice.
And say, hey, can I grab 15 of the top girls in that age group from Utah, and can we go kick some butt in Surf Cup and go see what happens, right? Or head down to a showcase somewhere and
Nice.
Not be necessarily affiliated with anyone,
Right.
but more of an independent team that is more on a select side.
Right.
And I just want to share the mentorship with these kids, because I think that's where it starts. Like if I'm mentoring a 16, 17-year-old, it's a little late.
Yeah.
But to start that process now with an 11, 12-year-old, I think that's going to be the most beneficial towards the future of soccer. Like it's our job to let them know what is done at the highest level, what needs to be done, and share that dream with them. Because some of them have no idea. They have no idea how to get to the top level. And so that's my goal, is to at least educate them and show them what's being done. And it's up to them to decide if they want to continue, waking up early and going on runs and staying fit and weightlifting and doing activation and stretching. Like, how many kids stick around after practice to stretch?
Yeah.
They don't do
Very
it.
few.
Hop in the car and let's go. The disciplined ones will stick around and stretch.
Yeah.
Things like that. So something I'd like to accomplish is just that, right? Like how many people can I impact? How many kids can I, share my journey with that can help them out?
Man, I love it.
So yeah, that's my goal.
Last question. What advice would you give to the younger version of Vincent, that 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, with all the knowledge you have now? If you could just like go back in time and whisper something in your ear just to help out, what would you say?
Dang, I've never really been asked that before, but I'd probably say just stay, I guess just be myself, to be honest.
Right.
I think I was influenced by a lot of people. I tried to change how I played. I tried to change how I dressed, how I did this, how I did that. Kids are influenced easily
Yep. Yep.
nowadays, and I was influenced easy. Any kid is, right?
Yeah.
We're looking to fit in, and I'd say the most successful people that I know, and that especially in the sports world, they don't care what
Yeah.
you think of them.
Yep.
They don't care what time it is. They're gonna go get their training in. They're
Yep.
gonna go hit the gym. They're gonna go do what is gonna help them.
Nice.
I'd say that. I'd say and whether it was talking to me or just the youth generation, like, just go be yourself.
Right.
Just be yourself, because that's that's really the only person you can trust. No one else is gonna go put in the work for
Yep.
you. No one else is gonna go put up the reps for you. No one else is gonna do the heavy lifting for you. You have to go do that yourself. And so once you kind of connect those dots of and are content with who you are as a
Right.
person, then yes, then maybe you can go let a friend in
Right.
and go from there. But yeah, I'd definitely, I'd probably say that. I'd probably say, just I should have just focused on myself a little bit more.
Yep.
And but I'm doing that now, and
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably why I'm at where I'm at.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, I appreciate you coming in. It's interesting when I asked you that question. It was I came out of it like, be true to yourself. And the other thing that I love about you and you being an entrepreneur is you bet on yourself. And so, like me, one of my personal goals going into 2024, and I say it, tell myself every day, is I'm going to bet on myself. Like, stay true to your values, know who you are as a person. Don't let people try to rattle you, because sometimes people try to hit at your success. I'm pretty sure, like, you've done some successful things, and people, like, jealousy comes out in different ways, and they try to, people try to break down what you're building, and continue to bet on yourself, man. I mean, it's just hearing your evolution from your AYSO, high school, playing at Santa Barbara, to where you are now. Like, there were some pitfalls and things, but you believed in yourself. You learned, took some punches, but also threw some punches, and you're coming out the other end. And so there's no doubt that you'll be successful. We'll have to certainly be in touch, because I just want to hear you progress over the next couple of years. And you're in this unique industry where there's so much room for growth. And out in Utah, it sounds like people haven't fully bought in, but it's going to be like San Jose and Mountain View and Los Santos, where people, like, everyone does it now. Like, you go out to any park, there's people doing, all kind of stuff. Man, I wish you were here locally, just selfishly. One of my dreams was always, and I touched on this with another person I did a podcast with, is to have people come in at a young age and stay with that club all the way through, even when they're done with college, and, like, come in and being able to get the on the field stuff, but also have them work with, strength and conditioning, so they could get that, have like a WPSL team or a USL team, so they could play against adults as they get closer to playing in college. Because I think probably one of the things that would have helped you is if you had an adult team to actually play on, that kids from college come back in the summer, and you're doing that at like 16, 17. Like, that's perfect. Like, a freshman or playing with someone, a sophomore in college, and at water break, you'd say, hey, like, what was that experience like? I'm pretty sure if you had that consistently, and that was like a total club atmosphere, maybe your freshman year at Santa Barbara would have been a little bit different.
Absolutely.
So, but I appreciate you coming in. How do people get, what's your tag on Instagram, so people can look you up and get a hold of you, and when they travel into Utah, or times when you're coming back to the Bay Area, they can reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely. Instagram is the easiest way to get a hold of me. It's A to Z training.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. So at A to Z training is my Instagram tag. It's it's got a lot of my content on there, from working with different athletes, different environments, whether it's outdoor, indoor, weightlifting, sprint work, all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's got a variety on there, and it has all my tags there too. So, like, my email's on there, my business phone number, all that stuff. So I'd say the easiest way is Instagram. So A to Z training.
Are you open to, like, clubs, like, reaching out, and, like, you come in and maybe put some, maybe a program together. Say I'm a club in like say Michigan, and we don't have really a strength and conditioning. And are you open to maybe them reaching out to you and you coming out or putting together maybe some type of program?
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. I mean, I work with club. Like I said, I do work with Avalanche and La Roca out there.
Okay.
So I am open to the team environment. So writing those programs is pretty easy. Working remote is pretty easy. I'm
Okay.
hoping to tap into more of that in 2024. I think the in-person stuff is definitely rolling itself out, and I think it's now time to kind of get that growth going.
Yeah. One of the good things about COVID is like Zooms come out,
Hmm.
and so people, it doesn't have to be everything face to face.
Yeah.
It can just be like, via computer and stuff.
Yeah.
Any last thing you want people to kind of know about you? If I didn't hit the right buttons in a question, anything that, you want people to know about Vincent?
No, I think, to be honest, I just appreciate you having me because, I came out here for vacation and come get to tap into something like this. And I think this is probably the biggest gift I could be offered right now,
Right.
just because I think that's where I'm headed is that this message has to get out there
Yeah.
on like what I'm doing. I've kind of stayed under the radar for some time, and I just feel more confident in my own skin right now with what I'm doing, and it obviously shows.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, that's what I'd say is, um, I guess just keep an eye out because that's kind of the direction I'm headed.
Vincent's coming in 2024, so be on the lookout. But super appreciative that you come out, and we'll certainly be in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks.